Another short one, still deep inside the 50 to Shanahan. Now the hand pass out to Thompson. They worked it pretty well, the Saints. Thompson straight up to half forward. Hall. Lappin. Beautifully. He saw Aussie Jones going past, and Jones kicks the first goal of the game. He leads the competition in hand passes, but has only 3 today. Here's Zilla. Up towards half forward. Low. Works to the front. Spills to Aussie Jones. He burns them off. 48 metres out. What a goal by Aussie! He's kicked a left foot and a right foot.
Well, it is our pleasure to catch up with one of the great blokes in footy and one of the most exciting players to represent the Saints for quite some time. I think we all remember the runs down the wing at Waverley Park, and then obviously the move to half-back and the influence at Marvel Stadium, or Telstra Dome as it was at the time, and one of the greatest goals we've ever seen in a grand final, obviously back in '97. I speak of Aussie Jones. And Oz, nice to catch up with you again, mate.
Yeah, good day, gents. Thanks for having me tonight.
Now, those early days, sort of when you grew up not all that far away, like a Victorian boy coming to the Saints at an interesting time. Tony Lockett had just left the club. A lot of you young guys sort of came in as a result of some of those picks that were acquired. And what was the St Kilda like that you found when you arrived under Stan Ellis?
Yeah, certainly different times. We were at a pretty rundown Moorabbin at the time. I think it's pretty famous that the change rooms, I mean, the whole place, to be honest, the reception, the social club was all pretty ordinary. We had a weights room that had rotten floorboards and all that sort of stuff. So probably a fair bit different to what the boys experience now. Not only at Moorabbin, but down at Seaford when they moved down there with sort of first class facilities all around. So they deserved to get spoiled, but we certainly walked into something a little bit different back then. But it was exciting because the club had sort of made a pretty big effort to go down a different path. You know, obviously they played finals early 90s on the back of a few older recruits. And just in 94, the draft of 94, they obviously went with me, Joel, Brownie, Dad with Lappo and the Wakelands and a few other guys. And yeah, we started to build a pretty young core group.
Aussie, before that 94 draft, and obviously it was a pretty good draft for us, but you spent time with the Collingwood reserves, is that right? And Melbourne as well? What happened with those clubs?
Yeah, so back in my day when I was playing in the TAC Cup, now the NAB Cup, the lists were quite small, I think, and when the AFL clubs got injuries, they used to call up the under-18s kids to fill in. So I played a game for Collingwood, and I was at the Dandenong Stingrays at the time. They got a call from Collingwood never to send me back. They thought I was a bit slight and a bit fragile and all those sort of things. So I was pretty confident Collingwood weren't going to draft me. And then I actually did the same with Melbourne. When I was with the Stingrays, we went down to Cardinia Park and played the Geelong Falcons under-18s. They beat us by about 30 goals. The following weekend, I played for Melbourne's twos against Geelong's twos, and they beat us by 30 goals. So back-to-back 30-goal thumpings down at Cardinia Park. And I remember Rod Grinter was running around the twos, and he's, to this day, he's probably the biggest spray I've ever copped from a teammate. And I was an under-18 filling in for Melbourne, and he absolutely ripped me. I got another letter. The Dandenong Stingrays got another letter from Melbourne saying, "Don't send this kid back to us again." So there was 2 clubs where I knew I wasn't going when the draft day came around.
So you get drafted eventually by St Kilda, and then your first game you end up going over to Perth to play. It's a bit of a daunting debut, I guess. I mean, you'd played a couple of the pre-season matches before that. But how's Perth as a first up?
Yeah, it was pretty daunting. Absolutely spot on. West Coast were reigning premiers as well. First game, I actually started in a forward pocket, and I'm sort of walking from our huddle for the start of the game, and John Worsfold comes over to me. You know, he's the reigning premiership captain, known for his hardness and all that sort of stuff. And I'm in for a pretty tough day here, but he actually come up, shook my hand, wished me all the best. Well and truly beat me on the day, but more just didn't let me near the footy. He certainly didn't pick on me, which I thought he was going to do. I thought he was going to just brutalise me and punch the crap out of me, but he actually just beat me because he was more physically stronger, mentally stronger, reigning premiership captain. I just think he knew he had me beat right from the first bounce. But to this day, I remember the game and how respectful and positive John Worsfold was. And even now, I've got letters from John when I played my milestone games. At times, he was an opponent of mine, then coach of West Coast, wishing me all the best in the future, and also congratulating me on the career I'd had to date. So, sign of a true gentleman.
Absolutely. Now, there were some good signs from St Kilda pretty quickly in that pre-season of 95. We beat Carlton at Waverley in a ripper of a game. You kicked 3. Joel Smith kicked the winner. We came from about 40 points down. Won the pre-season the following year in 96, but just couldn't quite get it together until we recovered from 1-4 in 97. Can you sort of take us back to that moment? You had a brilliant year in 97, but from 1-4 to launch into a grand final, can you pinpoint a particular turning point?
Yeah, I can. Absolutely. I think anyone from the club at the time will sort of highlight that after the 1-4, we went upstairs into a meeting room that we had in Moorabbin. And anytime you went upstairs, you sort of risked your life. Like I said, the whole joint was about to fall down. So we all sat there and we sort of looked at each other in the eyes. Stan Alves ran the session and basically said, "This is where it's at. We've got a squad together that needs to be better." We highlighted a few things. We changed a few training habits. Stan basically got up in front and said, if I'm not the right man, let me know. And he got 100% support from the group. Had great leaders, Berkey Halves, Lowy, even Nicky Winmar. Probably doesn't get mentioned so much for the leadership, but was huge mentor for me in my playing days. And from then we sort of really did turn it on, to, I think we won 15 of the next 16, something like that. It's sort of unheard of. And then, from the Saints Footy Club leading into that time, I don't think they'd done that too often in their entire history. So it was huge. It was a roller coaster. It was good to be part on. And, obviously the end result, which we'll probably get to, didn't go our way. It sort of felt for that period of time, we felt invincible and we could beat anyone.
Aussie, did you see that period coming?
No, not to that level. You guys have sort of mentioned already that we had Smitty, Brownie, Lapo that sort of complemented the stars that we had going around. There was probably some unheralded guys too. The Wakelands were sort of holding down key positions down back. Matty Lappin had a huge year as well. So we didn't see that coming, but because we did have, I won't say arrogance, but a little bit of confidence in amongst the younger guys that the club brought in. We sort of rode it a little bit, and as much as we didn't see it coming, once it was happening, there was no real disbelief. It was sort of like, yep, we're up to this, we're good enough, let's ride it out.
So speaking of, as you say, we're going to move into grand final. I mean, we all do remember one moment basically that happened in that game. Let's actually take you to that point where you've received the kick from halves on the back flank, right on, looking up the wing. What are you looking at ahead of you? What are you thinking? Are you actually thinking, I'm off here, or was there an option that you thought I should hit that option, or where did it take you? Yeah,
you can probably see a couple of times. It's actually really, you can sort of clearly see that at times I did look to sort of give it off. So it wasn't a plan from half back to kick the goal, but I'll go back a little bit. It was actually a set play. The kick was to go to Robert Harvey, on that 45, about 15 out, and then try and get outside the zone to me to try and use my pace and run. So quite amazing that something like that comes off at that level, but it was strong. Early on in the run, I actually looked to give to Brett Cook, and then I think, no, I'll just let him smash Kim Costa here. I'll just let him do all the dirty work, and I'll just stay on the outside and run and get a hot dog from the grandstand while I'm going past. And then again, I actually look to kick the ball inside 50, and I do that weird bounce thing where I sort of go to kick it but drop the ball and it comes back to me. And then I'm basically just confused. I handball to Tomo and think I'm done, and he sort of fumbles it, mainly because it was a shit handball. And then I get it back and manage to slot it. So, yeah, my family's basically say to me, obviously winning would have been the premiership medallion, but if we had won, that'd be on every grand final Channel 7 moment for the rest of our lives, but it gets sort of pushed away. But I'd rather missed, and it changed the course of the game, and we won. But it's a nice memory, and I'm coaching Bunyip out here in Gippsland now, and every time the boys have a few beers, they YouTube it and show me just to piss me off.
Probably increases to about 14 bounces by the time the
That's right. Once I've had a few, it does.
Post, so obviously 97, we're in front at halftime in the grand final. It's pretty close to obviously winning a flag. In 98, we're 11-3, and on top of the ladder, things are going pretty well. Within about 8 or 9 weeks, we've got a new coach, and we're on track to win a wooden spoon within 2 years. I guess we spoke about how quickly it rose. Can you pinpoint why it dropped so quickly?
I can't. I've been asked this a lot, and thought about it a lot, especially because in the rooms in 97, it was after the grand final. It was really emotional, and I actually got criticised a little bit from a couple of players that I didn't show that emotion. It was probably because I was 20. I could look around the room and think, we've got something here. I was obviously as disappointed as anyone, but probably. Some of the older boys were really visibly emotional, and I probably didn't get to that point because I thought that's okay. We're going to have a run of a few finals appearances and all that sort of stuff. And as you said, we sort of dropped off just as quick as we went up. So I can't pinpoint it. Obviously in 97, Joel does his knee. He ends up going to Hawthorn for probably a little bit of security options, and I'm not sure he was treated the best by the Saints. There was a few things like that. Spider ends up ducking off. Some of our absolute superstars are now 2, 3, 4 years older, and they're probably the depth through the young guys probably didn't match these older guys. Not so much getting to the end of their career because the stars that I mentioned probably played for another 3 or 4 years, but we just probably didn't get that depth through the list to be able to sustain it. And as you said, it dropped off pretty quick. 98 finals appearance, but never really looked damaging. And then 99, 2000, 01 were pretty ordinary.
8 possessions. He averages 29 over the past 3 seasons against the Crows. Harvey out wide. Jones is running.
And that's danger for the Crows. Costa and Bachut. Jones the length of the ground nearly. 60 out. Will he take them all on? Handball inside to Thompson. A fumble. Back. Aussie Jones goes with the left. Kicks it and gets it. What a goal.
Aussie, after that 98 season of disappointment, I guess, ultimately, Stan Alves was moved on. And there's been accusations, I guess, for 15, 20 years about what happened there, and people talk about the players were involved in that, and there was talks of mutiny and all that sort of stuff. Can you give us a bit of insight into what the locker room was like around that time?
Yeah, it was probably it was a little bit awkward at the time. I wasn't involved in much of that sort of stuff. Again, we sort of touched on it earlier. My outlook on footy was playing the game, getting yourself right, enjoying it, and, representing the club to the best of their ability. I sort of didn't deal with much of the back house. It was sort of part of it that didn't really interest me. And, I get asked about coaches a lot. And, I was really surprised that Alvesy got the flick. I wasn't surprised when Tim Watson was moved on because it was actually his call. He sort of come to us with 6 or 7 rounds to go in the season when he was gone. When Blighty got the flick, I was surprised, but didn't see it coming, didn't look into it too much. So it was an awkward place to be. It was more awkward for the short time after when, Stan Alves was still the biggest influence in my career. He was huge in sort of taking the club down the youth path, and then actually having the confidence in 95 and 96 to play us. Probably ahead of our time a little bit, but obviously the result 97 showed that it was worth it. So huge surprise, strange place to be. Then we sort of talk about why did things drop off? Probably the instability with the coaching staff and all those sort of things. Certainly don't help any footy club, do they? The really strong clubs that have sustained success don't do it.
So we talk about you brought in. Talk about Timmy Watson, talk about Blight, talk about Dan Grant Thomas. all very, very different coaches. Is there something you were able to take then from one coach and the next coach and the next coach there and just sort of go, okay, and that's kind of where the point you got to in 05 where you played a different game and you changed kind of how you played the game? And was there anything that you brought from all of them in any sort of way at all?
Yeah, they're all very, very different. Obviously, Stan probably a little bit old school. You know, we trained in a certain way, but nothing like the clubs do now. You know, Tim was a strange one. He didn't have any apprenticeship, but had done, you know, some time in the media. I was actually an Essendon supporter growing up and had number 32 on my back, so I was pretty excited for the first little bit. You know, that didn't turn out all that well. I wouldn't know how Blighty coaches. He wasn't there long enough and didn't turn up enough. And probably, you know, as much as I say Alvesy was the biggest influence, I'd probably coach myself more like Grant. You know, with the man management sort of stuff. You know, I'd sort of pride myself on the guys that I coach each week are in a frame of mind to deliver their best. But probably similar to Grant as well. Not brilliant tactically, you know, myself. So I sort of feel with Grant, he had an amazing footy brain next to him in the box in Matt Rendell. But I don't know if Bundy got enough say. I don't know. I didn't sit in the box a lot, but yeah, I sort of took a little bit from Alvesy and a little bit from Tomo, and you know, Tim and Blighty were there for short times.
Grant Thomas seems to be the type of coach that would maybe suit the way you play. He was big on players playing on instinct and the natural style of the game and being perhaps maybe more offensively minded. You're a player that, you know, take the game on, run, carry, a lot of pace and long goals and those sorts of things. Do you sometimes feel now, looking at the AFL from the outside, that maybe tactically the game almost takes that out of people a little bit, and there's still room for allowing players to be themselves and play with flair, and maybe you get that a little bit more coaching at a local level?
Yeah. So before I get into like what I think of the current day footy, Parker, I think you just called me a loose, unaccountable halfback flanker and reading between the lines. So thanks for that, mate. But
a very good one at that. So.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks. Yeah, good cover. Well, yeah, well backed up. You can sort of see they play like robots. You know, they defend like robots. They defend as teams and all that sort of stuff. It works. It's the modern game. I love watching it. You know, it's quick. The skill levels really high. You know, someone like Milne that didn't finish all that long ago. Imagine taking the instinct out of his game. You know, he kicked over 600 goals at whatever 2.2 a game. You know, if he hasn't got instinct, he hasn't got a heap. But his instinct was everything he had. You know, no one could tackle him. He could turn blokes inside out. So I think there's a space to get the balance right, you know, and I reckon maybe the last couple of years they've probably gone back to allowing a little bit of freedom in players' games. And when I say, you know, a little bit of freedom, it still has to stick within certain parameters, you know, and Richmond have got it. You know, you can see Dusty at times where he'll just slide forward when he thinks, you know, he's going to have an opponent that he's going to beat one-on-one. You know, at the other end, Basher Hooley seems to run with a fair bit of freedom because they're so confident in his decision-making ability and their ability to run the footy as a team and defend as a team. So I'd love to see more freedom. Of course I would, because that's how I played. But I can understand the modern coaches and the success they get on, you know, this full team structure and all that sort of stuff. But I reckon there's a place for a bit of balance.
Off the back of that comment, how do you reckon you would have gone if you'd stuck around for a few more years and played under Ross in that kind of 07, 8, 9, 10 period, if it lasted that long, obviously. But you know, that was a pretty rigid, really structured kind of game style. How do you reckon you would have gone in that kind of period?
Well, I retired at the end of 05 because footy was getting too serious and there was meetings about meetings. So how do you reckon I would have gone? I would have walked out of meetings on Monday morning because we used to have meetings. This is 05. We used to have meetings on Monday morning to set up our meetings for the week. And I'm like, are you serious? Can we just get those red and yellow things out and kick them around? So, mate, I would have been shithouse, and not because I couldn't have played under Ross Lyon. From all reports, all the players who played under him absolutely loved him, but it wouldn't have suited me, mate, not one little bit.
Now, a bit of a contrasting moment between two matches that you've played in. Now, we had the '96 pre-season grand final where siren went, crowd went nuts, crowd's absolutely packed with supporters, old fella climbing the point post, celebrating like it was like we'd actually won a premiership, to then move on to 2004 where we basically went, no, that's nothing. It doesn't matter. So just the contrasting moment. How's the difference in the feeling of those two?
Yeah, very, very different. But even for us, you sort of talk about the supporters. The supporters probably enjoyed 04 more than us. I enjoyed 96, and then, there's obviously a pretty famous photo of Tomo and Lenny with that weird wizard trophy looking like their cat had died. It was just horrible. We didn't have a lot of success. We've just taken home a trophy that the AFL felt was relevant enough to have a trophy, and poor old Lenny's got to get up there, who was probably a little bit excited inwardly and had to get up there and pretend he didn't care and all that sort of stuff. It was just a weird fielding, and and that was sort of Tomo's outlook, that we were only chasing one sort of title and everything sort of on the way was irrelevant. Whereas, even the 97 grand final, prelim final, we had a little bit of it. I actually finished on the bench in the 97 granny and prelim. As soon as the siren went, I was really excited, ran on the ground, which players are, because you've just earned the opportunity playing at granny. And a couple of senior players sort of brought it back a little bit. And I just thought they got the balance wrong at that time. St Kilda Footy Club hasn't got a huge amount of success, and I reckon we should celebrate, everything we get.
Looking at this year in a football sense, there's always been debates around, will the season have an asterisk against it? You're going through difficulties at a local level, as are most of us in sport, that the AFL can generally create a way to survive with bubbles and exemptions and travel restrictions and all of that sort of stuff. But how do you feel about, I guess, the way they're handling it now and the way this whole year looks from your point of view at the AFL? Are you comfortable that this season's going to be one where, in a sense, whoever wins the premiership, it's almost more difficult than it's ever been before, and there should certainly be no asterisks against the year?
I'd probably look at it a little bit different, Parker. I reckon there will be an asterisk, and depending on your outlook on footy, will mean whether that asterisk is a positive or a negative. I think the AFL team that wins the premiership this year has done an amazing job to get their players and their club up and about. You talk about the asterisks, the whole world's got an asterisk, really, hasn't it, for 2020? If you've been able to handle this time positively, keep your group upbeat. I love Damien Hardwick because he's really honest, and I saw an interview with him last week where he sort of spoke about how even in the first 2 or 3 weeks of lockdown, he didn't really handle it that well. Some of the players, Heath Shaw's another one. He said he's like a footy trip. The first week of lockdown, he just went on a bender. So the club, the coaches, the players that can manage this time in completely unprecedented times, environment. Personally, I reckon it'll have an asterisk, but it'll be an asterisk of well bloody done. Well done to get your club, your players, and your coaching staff through a tough time and win a flag. I reckon it'll be a huge effort.
We saw you a month or so ago on a club video chat with Joel Smith and Brownie and those guys. How involved are you at a club level, with the club these days? And was there a period, kind of when you walked away that you're a little bit disillusioned with the club? And how did it kind of come about that you came back to do that video for the club?
Yeah, so I never really had much of an issue with the club. The biggest strain probably put on the club when Ross was coach. And like I said, I don't say anything negative about coach, because all my teammates that played under Ross reckon he was an absolute genius. It was more the fact that the club locked down. It was an absolute shutout of everyone. You guys would have seen it, heard it, experienced. It wasn't just sort of the media, the amount of closed training sessions where supporters weren't allowed to go. The access to past players was sort of taken away as well. And it wasn't so much the club. I understood where they were coming from, but a lot of the players, not so much disillusioned, but because we weren't actually welcomed back into the fold of the footy club, we just stopped trying, I suppose, and stopped trying to go to games and functions and all that sort of stuff. Whereas the last few years, probably on the back of Cowboy Neil initially and Justin Kazitsky, they've really started to engage the past players. The video chat you talk about had Tony Brown in it, who's the welfare manager down there, who I'm still great mates with. So it's probably just come about with a change of outlook, making sure the past players that gave up, a fair bit of their time and effort to represent the footy club are seen like that. So I've hosted a few supporter rooms for them in the last couple of years, and probably with the shutdown too, Nick, the club didn't have any content for their Facebook page, so they started to go on to us old pricks to tell some stories and all that sort of stuff, mate. So I'm telling you, as soon as the AFL season starts again, you won't hear of us again. So we just made the most while we're in the limelight there for a bit.
Now, speaking of the current day and all what's happening at the moment with the team and everything, at the moment we've got a small back pocket, great on the left, great on the right, kicker, basically by the name of Clark. How much have you seen about him? And has anyone said to you, hey, there's a little bit of Aussie Jones in this kid? Because the way he moves, the way he kicks the ball around, he is going to be a very good player. And a few people have mentioned they can see just a little bit of in there.
Yeah, I like Clark. I actually like the way the whole list is going. I'm not going to fake me way through this. I don't see anywhere near enough of the Saints as I'd hope. I've got a couple of boys. One's playing junior footy, so I'm at his games all the time, coaching senior footy. Haven't got Foxtel at home, and bloody hell, the Saints are on a lot of Foxtel games. There's not much free to air going on. So, and I'm also in Gippsland, so I sort of don't get into watch them as much as I'd like. But what I see, I like. I think I'm not a genius to say this, but Max King's going to be someone we can build the side around. I think Jack Billings is going to be an A grader if he's not already. His form just continually stacks up. Sort of getting that between 20 and 30 possessions, but backing it up with 2 or 3 every week. Again, I'm not going to fake it or bullshit. I'm not sure we're ready to sort of challenge the very, very good sides, but I think the list is building to an area where we will shortly.
They've kept possession of the ball well. Zilla back to Burke. Burke straightens up. Kicks to a contest at centre half forward. No contest. Barry Hall. And here goes the Ozman. Big Aussie. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Jones goes in. The goal of the year by Aussie Jones. Aussie at his best.
Aussie, you still had a couple of good years in you, and obviously 04-05 we played prelim finals and a kick or two away from grand final appearances again. Having been through that experience in 97, obviously, and 98 again, what was it like in those couple of years under GT, but being one of the more experienced guys? And what was the difference from that kind of 96, 97 era when you were one of the kids?
Yeah, it was certainly different. I felt like the 04-05 sides had a lot more depth. Obviously, without sort of going back to 97 too much, we had quite a few key players out that really sort of probably hurt our chances. Whereas in 04-05, there was some actually really good players missing out in playing. So that depth was absolutely critical. And, there's probably a little bit of luck, some decision making from the box and on the ground that probably hurt us in a couple of preliminary finals, not being able to go on and get that another opportunity at a grand final. So, you sort of talk about a lot of teams that can have a run where they might make one granny and win it. We were probably that side that had a really good list, really good momentum, positive feel within the club, but just sort of couldn't get past that prelim stage when I was coming to the end of my career.
Now, in 04, we had a pretty big win against reigning premiers in Brisbane. Generally, we see the key moment of Schwartz putting through the goal from outside the 50, but there was a bit of a key moment not long before that. How much did you miss that point by?
It wasn't heaps, but when you're 30 metres out pretty much straight in front with no pressure, to miss altogether, it doesn't matter how much by. I should have kicked the goal, much less not even scrape in for a point. But looking back, it actually worked out well because Schwartz went back and kicked the goal. by me missing, kept the ball up our half. It was all part of my plan, just to kick an absolute horrible kick. If I had to kick the goal, I would have gone back to the middle and give Brizzy a chance to get over the top of it. So that all worked out well. He's a ripping fella, Troy Schwartz, but he'll be remembered for that kick. He did bugger all in his career anyway, so he'll be remembered for that forever.
Classic 7-point play. Now, I know you've got a meeting very shortly, but you're an All-Australian in 97, then you're an All-Australian again later in your career. And I know you went through some difficulty in that back end of the 90s, early 2000s. How much did it mean to you to, in a different role, climb the tree again and obviously get that recognition? And I guess the second part of that question, you retired relatively young, and I know you've spent a lot of time in country football as opposed to perhaps the Melbourne bubble. Was it a little bit motivated by that? I think you would have been, 29 when you gave it away?
Yeah, I actually turned 29 about a week after my last game. So I was 28 at the time. And, I sort of spoke about some of the younger guys probably didn't get to the level of our superstars, 99, 2000. And I was one of them. I don't shy away from it. My best footy come when I was motivated, enjoying the game. And I had periods right throughout my whole career, and 99, 2000 was probably the low point where I struggled for the motivation to train at the level required of AFL footy. I had some great influences at the club. Robert Harvey, obviously recognised across our industry as perhaps the best trainer ever. But it was actually a guy called Andrew Thompson. You guys had known him, a club best and fairest winner, that really sort of drove me to get back to getting fit, getting motivated, playing the game. And it would have been about the end of 2002, I think. It was draft trade deadline was 2:00, and I was on like a phone conference with Grant Thompson, Adrian Dodoro from Essendon, and Kevin Sheedy. And Grant Thomas sort of came over the top and said, "I've got a role for you. I'd love you to stay at the Saints." And he moved me to half back, and I enjoyed a nice change in my career at different roles. Always probably pretty handy at reading the play and kicking the footy. So it worked out well, and it's a nice way to finish off my career.
And just a final thought to squeeze one in, that the fact that you were such a good kick on both sides of the body, was that instinctive? Were you ambidextrous, I guess, as a youngster? Because you were probably one of the best. We look at Sam Mitchell and guys like that at using your left and your right.
Yeah, I am reasonably handy sort of in most sports on both sides, but it was actually the old man. If I ever had a kick with the footy with the old bloke, he'd say, "You got to kick on the left," because he knew if I was mucking around with my mates or, having a kick at training, it'd always be on the right, So he knew I was doing enough on my preferred side. So anytime the old man dragged me out to the street or up the park, it was always on the left, and I bloody hated him at the time for it. I just wanted to kick some rippers from the boundary on the right. But, when you get to TAC level and then AFL level, I just feel it makes you such a better player and harder to read, harder to catch, because I had the confidence to go on my left, and if you're trying to defend that, you can shut down certain players because they know they're only going to kick on their left. So you go to that side, shut them down. If they end up kicking on their right, it's actually a positive of how you've defended them. So I saw it as a strength. I didn't mind going on the left. Not too many coaches sort of had a crack at me at times, and I'm still doing a lot with some junior footballers out in the bush now, and I'm pretty hard on them, getting them on the left, and I talk to them. I say to them, it's going to make you twice as good a player. It's probably not, but that's the way I sort of try and influence the boys to get better on their other side.
Good luck with the Bulldogs at Bunyip, mate, and good luck with footy resuming. It'll be great to have your obviously your expertise in local footy for whatever this season looks like. Wish we could have an hour with you, mate. Hopefully we can do it again down the track.
Yeah, lock me in, guys. I've enjoyed it. Obviously we speak a bit, Parko. Footy's all over the shop at the moment. I'm coaching the under-12s out here at Bunyip, so I got home tonight. My wife works late. I've fed them. Now I've got a committee meeting to see where the hell footy and our club's going in the next 4 months. So pretty hectic, but wouldn't have it any other way. It's the greatest game in the world.
Certainly is, mate, and you made it pretty special as well. So good luck going forward.
Thanks, gents.